Welcome back, everyone. How are you doing? It's me,
Yeah.
Jacob. We got Anthony here. We're back to do a sports episode. Lots happening in the NBA, as you guys know. Glad you're here.
Yeah. So we took a week off. Nothing too major happened. You might have missed we might have missed the NBA finals kind of ending and the draft happening. But it's cool. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to go over it. The
And
first
get into
thing,
it all.
yes, we're going to get into it all. But first and foremost, the biggest thing, obviously, the NBA finals. You see it on the screen. You see Jokic, Denver Nuggets.
Yep.
When we last talked, it was
Yep.
when we last talked, it was tied 1-1. We said someone was going to win in six. That was clearly
Exactly.
our jinx. We were wrong. Denver said that's not happening. We're winning the next three games, and that's what they did.
Boom.
Just
Five. Just to spite us, probably.
that was our jinx. We put it in the title. That was our jinx of the
Didn't even
episode.
think about it, but there it
Punishment
is.
for missing a week is getting
We should
jinxed.
really start using this jinx to our advantage.
I know we need to jinx things that we want, or like we need to reverse the jinxing, do it a little bit differently.
Like the Commanders are gonna have the worst record in the NFL.
Football
That's
season
one
comes
bet right
around.
there.
Football season comes around. We're moving on to positive jinxes going on.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah.
the series. We are a little bit late on it, but not really too much in depth to go about there. It
No.
just went. Obviously didn't go the way that we talked about in terms of going to 6 games, but the Nuggets just kind of handled Miami for the following 3 games of that series. Jokic
Yep.
earned that Finals MVP, was just dominant throughout. And I think the biggest thing for Miami, and obviously, the offseason that's coming up, we're going to talk about that. But the biggest thing for Miami and for Jimmy Butler was just there wasn't enough. They just didn't have enough. Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Jokic, Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon, KCP, they had enough. Christian Braun, even, consistent
Yeah.
contributor. They had enough just top to bottom in their squad to consistently contribute. And Miami was just beat up. They had a long from the play-in tournament, had to deal with injuries. Tyler Hero, tried to make a late comeback, but, just not enough, too little too late ultimately for Miami.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of their run in the bubble, where they got through the best of the best in the East, and then they make it to the final game, the championship round, and they honestly they were gassed, and they lost to the Lakers, the better team with more weapons, more depth, all this things. I think that the Heat need to seriously think about a rebuild. Almost not a full on rebuild, but gathering new assets, stronger, maybe another star to go along with Jimmy and Bam, but they need something.
They're
It was
an
a great
interesting.
run for them, though. Historical run.
Oh my God, yes. One of the best at the expense of the Knicks, unfortunately, one of the better playoff runs that we've seen in a while. But I agree with you 100%. While Miami clearly, they have this track record of developing, undrafted or, maybe unheralded picks. So your Duncan Robinsons, your Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, they've turned these guys into legitimate contributors, but at the same time, you can only have so many of those guys, that helps you and that's good. But these top teams, when you're getting to the finals, that's not going to help you. That's not the champions have just a higher level of talent across the board. Denver did, and it cost Miami clearly. So obviously,
Nuggets were the better team. They earned it. That's it. End of story.
Yeah.
Congrats, Jokic, and the whole team.
Yeah, and it was interesting during the series, something that I've never seen before. We actually saw the Nuggets make a draft night trade.
Mm-hmm.
They traded a few. It was like
I didn't know they could.
Yeah, I didn't really know that was a thing, but it was like a pick swap with OKC, pretty much. And with that, obviously, that was the first trade that was made, but there were many. There were several really big ones, obviously, as a Wizards fan.
Especially with the Wizards.
I would say you felt the brunt of this. But yeah, I guess out of that, we can kind of get into it. And I think the biggest of them all clearly was the kind of Bradley Beal, Paul, or I was about to say Paul George, the Bradley Beal, Jordan Poole, and Chris Paul kind of
Swap.
just swap of all of them around. How do you, as a Wizards fan, what's your perspective? How are you feeling?
Well, I mean, when the first trade came with Beal, I kind of figured with the new GM, they're just blowing the whole team up, and I figured to be right when they ended up trading away Porzingis, and it's kind of just the vibe with the team now, obviously. But I'm kind of glad about this overall. I think we were very mediocre as a team overall. We weren't going anywhere. We didn't even make the play-in last year, and that's kind of a sign it's time to blow it up. And while we didn't really get a great return right away for Beal, we got Chris Paul, which I wasn't happy about because I heard we were going to buy him out, do whatever. But then we traded him for Poole, and that made me happier about things. I mean, Poole's obviously we're going to be paying him a lot. But we have nobody else to pay. He's a good young player he has a ring already. Like he's in a way a veteran. He'll be a veteran like player to a lot of these Wizards players on the team, and he could even be an all-star. Like who knows? He'll be the main guy there now, and maybe he could entice Kuzma to return, bring a little core there. That could be cool. But I mean, overall, I thought it was a little weird that the Warriors swapped for Chris Paul, kind of a guy on an expiring contract, old, but as a
Gave up
Wizards
a
fan,
pick.
I'll take it.
I would say gave up a
Yeah,
pick to do it too.
exactly. And it seems like a weird fit for the Suns too. Beal with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant doesn't seem like the exact type of guy you would want in that being that third star, but I mean, he deserves his chance. He's stuck it out with the Wizards for enough time. I'm happy to see him in a good destination with good owners, good players around him at least.
Yeah, I think it's a interesting thing with Golden State and Phoenix. I feel like both of them still have moves to make. You think about Golden State with Draymond Green, kind of his future still up in the air. Will I don't want to spoil too much on Phoenix, but obviously they have some big contracts that are still potentially movable that could be used to improve their current situation. And obviously, back to the Wizards, kind of your guys's just level of competitiveness and kind of going to the Porzingis trade as well. You guys picked up Tyus Jones, who I think a lot of people immediately after the Ja Morant suspension came down, a lot of people thought that Tyus Jones was going to end up being the guy. He obviously, with that trade, Marcus Smart being in Memphis, kind of changes things with that. But Tyus Jones is like a starting level point guard in the NBA. So to have him, you guys have Monte Morris too, Landry Shamet, Jordan Poole now. It's a Johnny Davis, obviously kind of iffy feelings from Wizards fans about him, but it's like talent in that backcourt. You have Corey Kispert, you have Denny Advia, Daniel Gafford as well. Like it's a good mix of talent there. So obviously like in a rebuild, but also not terrible at the same time. Like I feel like the moves that you guys have made have been decent.
Definitely, I agree, and I think with the biggest thing with that Porzingis trade, obviously we didn't touch on the Marcus Smart being dealt to Memphis, but the biggest thing for me was the initial trade rumors for Porzingis that eventually fell through were Porzingis for essentially nothing. I think we were
Yeah.
getting, I don't even know I don't think it was any viable players that played any minutes with the Grizzlies before. I think we were just getting Mike Muscala and Danilo Gallinari, which I was like, okay, but like Tyus Jones coming eventually, that made this deal a lot more worth it to me, and I'm glad we got something out of it that could end up being something good because he was really good with the Grizzlies last year, even with John Morant being available. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting to see. I'll be interested to see how he does with Jordan Poole in the backcourt.
Yeah. And I guess obviously we didn't kind of talk about it, or we didn't not a main focus, I guess, of this episode, but we can touch on it now, talking about the Grizzlies. Ja Morant suspension came down. It was 25 games. We
We were
think,
right on that suspension.
yeah.
Right
So
on.
while we might have been jinxed with the title, we were right with our suspension prediction.
Look at us.
Yeah, I would say, and it's going to have a huge impact on the Grizzlies this season. Obviously, costing Ja Morant money, as you mentioned in the last episode, kind of losing out
Award.
on that. Yeah, losing out on that All NBA potential. But coming out of that trade, though, for the Grizzlies was a need for someone to play that lead guard role. And through that, Marcus Smart ends up being the guy that they acquire. And I think we were talking about it too. It's everything that Dylan Brooks wants to be is what Marcus Smart is, and really is what Memphis needs. So while they're going to be missing out on John Morant, and they had to give up 2 first-round picks, which I feel like was kind of a steep price. It is. It's a steep price for Marcus Smart, but so not too far or not too recent, or not too recent. A very recent defensive player of the year. I think he was like NBA Hustle player of the year. He's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and a guy who is a true combo guard. So while Ja is out, he's going to be able to play that lead guard role. But when Ja comes back, he's going to be able to play right alongside him too. So that backcourt, the fit for Memphis there is seamless. It's a high cost, and giving up Tyus Jones, not not too fond of that for them, but Marcus Smart fits, really well for Memphis. So like that deal for them.
Exactly. And obviously the final trade, the most recent trade, we could say, the Rudy Gay swap with John Collins. I mean, the Hawks were bound to trade John Collins at some point. The rumors have been swirling basically the last 3 years, which it's kind of funny, the fact that he lasted that long through all that. But, I mean, the Hawks eventually just ended up getting nothing back for him with Rudy Gay. They got like a depth forward that they can use, but it was really more of a contract situation, getting more cap freedom there. Interesting to see what he'll be able to do fitting in with Markkanen and Walker Kessler, but that could be one of the best front courts in the NBA.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you think about Cleveland and the success they had with Markkanen there briefly, but having those, just lots of big, having 3 7-footers maybe, or 3 guys around 7 feet in your lineup. I guess John Collins, what is he? He's 6'10". So, not quite there, but you could start Kessler, and Markkanen's a good enough shooter. Last season, obviously, he took that huge leap. You could start Kessler and John Collins and Markkanen, and that's like a really good front court. They have size, athleticism, scoring ability, and, just through that size, ability to defend a lot of teams. Utah, that's a sneaky trade for them. They're obviously taking on the salary of John Collins, but
they're not paying many people right now.
Yeah, I would say I could see them. They, are in a position where, maybe they throw money at someone in free agency, or, they try to make another move, but they're a team I think that could surprise people next season just based off of what they've done up until this point.
Definitely. I agree 100%.
Obviously, had the trades happen, but more important than that, or I guess not more important than that, but right after some of those trades was the NBA draft. We missed that barely, but Jacob and I were actually physically together for the draft, so we didn't get an in-person episode in, but I was in Florida for this. We watched it together. We got to witness Victor Wembanyama get drafted number 1 overall. It's a pretty big pick. I guess a historic night. How did you feel about it? How did you feel about the draft in general and that top 3, I guess, too?
I think it was a great night for Wembanyama. I can't really pronounce his name right, but obviously he's going to be the next big thing. And I'm really excited to see how he ends up panning out with the Spurs. He's obviously coming into one of the best coaching staffs in the NBA. There's a good young core already starting to be built there, and he could be the next piece that puts the Spurs in play-in contendership. It's a great fit, and I'm glad he ended up there in a good spot. The next, I don't want to get too far in depth in this, but the thing that pissed me off was second and third. What happened there, especially with what Chance, the reporter, ended up reporting. With what's happening here. Essentially, he alluded to gamblers and all his big fan base, that he alluded that Scoot Henderson there's a growing chance that Scoot Henderson could end up getting drafted second after all this hype about Brandon Miller being the guy. And obviously the Hornets end up going with Brandon Miller. And a lot of the people that ended up placing bets uh, on Scoot going too were pretty pissed off, and they have reason to be because Shams works for FanDuel, which is kind of messed up that he can give away knowledge like this when
Bro, it's
people are like
crazy.
literally putting money on that. It's ridiculous. I mean, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. It kind of makes me think he should be in trouble in some way, but guess we'll see what happens there.
Did you have money on the second or third pick? This is the big question.
No,
Did Shams influence
I
you?
did not, but I could see myself being one of the people that would have had money, that would have bought into that trap. But luckily for me, I didn't gamble on that.
You avoided it. You avoided it.
Yes, exactly. But yeah,
Yes.
any thoughts for you on the top three?
Yeah, I would say just generally with the top three, it was a good group. I think that Brandon Miller, it went the way ultimately we thought it was going to. Brandon Miller going number two to Charlotte as another wing. I think he fits there. Scoot Henderson. Now, it's interesting with him at three because it seems like Portland, at least immediately after the draft, are projecting that they're going to try to keep Dame and that they would like to, try to be a team in contention. I I
I
like
don't see
that,
that, but
kind of public facing, thing, that ambition, but how realistic is that? I think that, free
not at
agency,
all.
yeah, I would say they have some cap space and stuff like that. The thing is, I don't know. It is going to take Dame requesting a trade to leave at this point. I don't think they'll trade him if he doesn't. But have they done enough, and are they going to be able to do enough in free agency to convince Dame to stay? And I feel like that's a question we've asked ourselves like the past 3 or 4 years, and we're going through it again. And it feels like every year they don't really do enough, but they end up keeping him. So I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening there. But in general, kind of good top three. Other than that, I guess we can get into some of our other thoughts on the draft. Quickly, though, do want to get your thoughts on the Wizards kind of pick. You got Bilal Coulibaly. It was a little trade back.
Trade
With,
up,
or
trade
no,
up.
you traded up. Yes, you guys traded up with the Pacers. Gave up, I think, it was
Yep,
two of your second round picks that you
yep.
acquired from the Suns in that Bradley Beal deal to pick up Bilal Coulibaly. What do you know about him, if anything, and how do you feel about that?
Honestly, not too much. I do know he did play with Wembanyama in France, which is pretty cool. And honestly, that team must have been pretty damn dominant because this guy's 6'8". Everything I'm reading about him is great. I mean, he's a guard forward at basically a wing at 6'8". That's exactly what the NBA, like the growing trend for the NBA, bigger players that can shoot, that can drive, that can kind of do it all and play on the wing, kind of stretch the defense out. And I think he'll be a good fit in that aspect, especially considering Kuzma will probably leave and we don't really have a solid 3 or 4. Like Denny still is a work in progress. But I think it's a great pick, and I think he should grow into somebody that ends up being successful. I mean, I've said this a lot about our picks in this 5 to 15 range, where they seem like great picks and then they don't work out, and that's how it's been for the Wizards the last 10 years. But I think this could be a solid one, especially considering there's teams trying to trade up to get him, and that's why we did eventually trade up one pick to get him. So I hope it ends up panning out.
I was going to say this pick reminds me a lot of, and maybe not in the sense of like teams trading up to get him. Obviously, this might just be me coping, afterwards. But this reminds me a
Mm-hmm.
lot of Frank and Aquila in terms of just like what they could be. I think it might have been the same pick. Aquila was the eighth or ninth pick overall. But a guy who is really young coming into the draft. Hit a growth spurt recently. Really good defender. Has the physical attributes, but offensively just hasn't necessarily. Just we don't know if they're going to project and grow into that NBA role. But he played obviously alongside Wembanyama, that pro experience at a really high level. Wembanyama's team made like the French League finals this past year. So to have
Yeah.
that experience and to be alongside him, we know that's a good team and we know that he was being developed by some good coaches out there. And, I think he has, Washington's going to be an environment where he's going to have that ability to really grow and turn into whatever he ends up turning into. So I think that has potential to be a good trade. Obviously, where you guys are at rebuilding, he's going to have the opportunity to, just kind of do whatever. So I think it'll be a good spot
Oh, yeah.
for him. And then coming out, obviously, Wizards pick, but we have a few kind of favorite picks of our own, or maybe not favorite picks, but just in general picks to talk about. So I'll let you kind of get into yours first. Who are your boys? Who are your two guys for this draft?
My boys, my favorite moment of the draft, you couldn't have not liked it, was the Amin Thompson and Asar Thompson duo getting drafted back to back, 4 and 5. They became the second duo all time in NBA history to be drafted as brothers in not just it was the first in the same draft class, but it was the first all time in the top 5, second all time in the top 5, only to Lonzo and LaMelo, which is honestly pretty recently. But it's just so really crazy that those two players have the talent to be drafted in the top 5 back to back as brothers. Great story, great for the family. They got interviewed, they got a ton of TV time for that. Awesome for them. And I'm really excited. They ended up with great coaches at the end of the day, with Monty Williams in Detroit and with I'm blanking, and Ime Udoka in Houston. Yeah, I mean they should have quality opportunity there in both those teams. They don't have many young players there. Should be good. I'm excited to see what they can do there.
Yeah, so I think for both of them, in squads that are going to be rebuilding, they're going to have the opportunity to get minutes. I think, like Houston and Detroit are in very similar situations. I think Houston maybe, and I think both teams with their new head coaching hires are going to try to be, more ambitious this year and make a push, to be outside of just that bottom barrel of the league. So especially Detroit, spending, making Monty Williams the highest paid head coach of all time. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of progress through that, how the rookies are integrated into that for them. For me, my favorite pick, I'm a homer, obviously went to Mizzou, so I had to go with Kobe Brown, sneaking into the first round somehow at number 30. He's been Mizzou's best player for a few years now. He did great in the tournament, led our team to the tournament, actually got us a win in the tournament finally, and ended up sneaking into the end of the first round with the Clippers. He was one of the older players drafted. He's going to turn 24 in January, so pretty old prospect, but in terms of his NBA readiness, I think he slots in really well with the Clippers. He's kind of undersized for like a 4. I mean, he's like 6'8", like 230, 240. So maybe not like the biggest power forward, but he's not necessarily quick enough to be a small forward. So he's like a tween, kind of like a PJ Tucker size-wise would be the comparison. But I think his offensive game is way better than that. And I think he could. I'm really happy he ended up with the Clippers. I think that's a team where, especially being at the end of the first round, he's going to play. Like, he's not getting drafted at 30 to sit on the bench. They're going to play him. He's going to be a part of the rotation. And I'm really excited to see what exactly he does for them going into next year.
Definitely. I'm excited to see that as well.
Yeah. All right. So, obviously, draft, that was a big thing. We're moving into the next stage of the offseason, I guess the final stage. Summer League is starting pretty soon, and free agency is coming up June 1st. So we have a few kind of predictions, I guess, some thoughts on stuff. I guess I'll let you start. We're going to start off with trades. We'll start off with trades. I will give you the floor on that. Who is your, I guess, what's your trade prediction of the offseason, or a trade you'd like to see, rather?
Yeah, so we alluded to this earlier. It's with Damian Lillard and the Trailblazers, the whole Scoot Henderson situation. Apparently, Dame's people weren't too happy about them drafting Scoot, and nor would I. I mean, as a guy that's been there for so long and a guy that just wants to compete, you'd think they would try to trade that pick and try to acquire another star, somebody that can help them win now. And I could see how that would frustrate somebody like Dame. And that's why I think trading him to the Miami Heat is a win-win, honestly, for both teams. I think the Heat could definitely use another star like Dame. If you pair Dame with Bam and Jimmy, I think that team can win a chip. And especially with those young, undrafted players that they have there, that team can win a chip and at least compete for the top seed in the East every year and for the next few years. That's a scary combination. For the Trailblazers, I think you get Lowry on an expiring contract. You get Duncan Robinson, who's a shooter. You take him again. Another expiring contract type player. You get some pieces there, some draft picks there. I'm sure. I'm sure they even have to throw in another pick or two or player or two to make that trade even work. But I think it's another trade there that at the end of the day, Portland should be rebuilding right now. They have way too many young players to try to compete and win right now with Dame, and it's time for them to give up and blow this team up by trading Dame. What's your trade?
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with Portland. I don't know. I'm going to go with obviously another player who's been talked about a lot and another guy who's, on a team that's been making moves. I'm going with DeAndre Ayton to Phoenix. And I actually have like a specific mock trade here on the bottom. I got Ayton in just a straight up swap. I think a sign and trade for Chris Middleton, I think would be interesting option for both teams. Obviously, Phoenix, they're looking for ways to just give themselves more scoring options, kind of replenish their team. I know we talked about the weird kind of fit of Bradley Beal in that system, and a lot of talk around Ayton has been surrounded with, trying to find, maybe 3 or 4 role players who could supplement their bench. But I think Chris Middleton gives them, another guy who in reality is a really good shooter. So he's someone who doesn't need to be on the ball all the time. If they're having Beal anyway, I think the Beal Booker combination, it kind of implies that one of them is going to be running the point. Probably, or I was about to say Bradley, but probably Devin Booker. So if it's Booker, Beal, you throw Middleton in there,
and then
Middleton at the 3, Kevin Durant at the 4. Give me whoever you want at the 5. I don't really care.
That's the best lineup in the NBA.
Yeah, I would say that's maybe the best starting lineup in the NBA. Granted, the health is the biggest thing with them. All of those guys, Devin Booker, Beal, KD, and Middleton, have had significant, injury issues within the past
recently too
3 to 4 years, like 3 years. So that's something that you have to consider. But Ayton is a guy who they've been wanting to move anyway. If you make this into a sign-in trade, it doesn't have to be a long-term deal with Middleton, maybe, 2 years and a player option or something like that. And it gives you the ability to really commit to this championship window now and upgrade with that high-level talent. I think that's the biggest thing with them right now. And where I didn't like the Beal trade was that's limiting yourself with the highest, he's not elevating the team that much further. It's a fringe all-star if he's healthy, but he's not pushing them that much further just individually. Chris Middleton is a guy who, on his own, may not push them that much further individually, but you think about him and Beal combined with KD and Booker already.
That's a scary combo.
Reiterating what we already said, that might be the most star power out of any lineup in the league, and out of any starting lineup in the league. So really would like to see that. Probably won't happen, but would be cool to see.
Definitely would be.
Yeah, and then I guess from there, we got some free agency predictions as well. I'll let you start with that, kind of with a re-signing for you.
Yeah, so NBA new season starts. Technically, the first day of the new season starts Saturday, so I'm hyped for that, July 1st. Bruce Brown, that's my pick for – he's going to re-sign with the Nuggets. That's my pick for the guy who could end up being Sixth Man of the Year next year if he re-signs. He had one of the best runs in the postseason with them that almost any player has off the bench in NBA history. he was just great all year for them in every aspect. And I think he opted out of the contract, which he deserved to do, to get paid more, obviously, after winning the chip, having this crucial role with them last year. He could get paid somewhere else. But I realistically don't think there's another team that can suit him as well as the Denver Nuggets do. He fit basically the perfect off the bench guard forward role that they needed. And I don't see many other teams finding or being able, the teams that need him being able to pick him up, like the Boston Celtics, the Bucks, having the space to pay someone like him. So I realistically seeing him coming back to the Nuggets. I don't see him going to a team like the Rockets, the Pistons, going to a team where he could be the guy there, but not really doing as much. I see him staying with the Nuggets there.
Yeah, no, I think
What's
that's
your pick?
yes, I think that's an interesting one with Bruce Brown. We'll definitely see where he ends up, and clearly the impact he had with the Nuggets. I mean, it's
Instrumental.
yeah, through the playoffs, definitely he played himself into more money. He's going to be someone who, through his playoff position, I wouldn't be surprised if one of those teams with a lot of cap space maybe wants to throw a lot of money at him, or he has some higher offers floating out there, and it'll be kind of something to consider.
Definitely will.
For me, I know obviously we were talking about Dame. Your trade was including Dame going to Miami, and that's obviously I think a lot of people obviously saying Dame's camp upset with that scoop pick. It does make sense for Portland to go into a rebuild, but I think it's pretty likely. Up until this point, I think the only thing that is going to make them trade Dame is if he comes to them with that trade request. Now, he hasn't done it yet. We don't know of that publicly yet. Maybe it happens, but there's a world where that definitely doesn't happen in, and Portland tries to go forward this year. I think someone who's a free agent this year and could really help them out is Kelly Oubre, the Tsunami Poppy. I think, former Wizard, former Golden State
Drafted by us.
Warrior. Yes. Played on
Phoenix
the Charlotte
Suns.
Hornets. Yes, Phoenix Suns, as I forgot about the Suns. On Charlotte last year and averaged over 20 points a game last year. So I think he kind of, Miles Bridges in his absence, kind of just out of the league last year. Kelly Oubre really took that role as Charlotte's just volume forward, like wing scorer. Obviously, 20 a game. He's a free agent. I think there's a high likelihood that he does return to Charlotte, but there have been talks of Charlotte maybe bringing back Bridges. Obviously, they brought in Brandon Miller, so that's another kind of wing guy who fits in that area. And it's just a rebuilding team. It's a lot of young talent there. I think Kelly Oubre is someone who obviously that career high season that he just had, or one of his career best years he just had, I could see him really fitting in Portland well. He might have to take a little bit of a pay cut, so like a mid-level exception, like around 12 or 13 million, something like that for 2 years, I could see working out for him. But he's someone who, alongside all of that young talent, you obviously have your Shaden Sharp, your Scoot Henderson, your Anthony Simons. He's someone who has a bit more size, but is a proven scorer and could be a legitimate contributor to that team. I don't think Kelly Oubre is like a championship. I don't think he is a starting player on a championship NBA team, but I do think he can be a legitimate, third option to Dame and Anthony Simons, or maybe if they try to work something out, and they have Nurkic potentially coming back as well. That's a solid lineup. If they're starting Dame, Anthony Simons, Shaden Sharp, Kelly Oubre, and Nurkic, it's a decent lineup, and that's a lineup that
they got depth.
Yes, that's a lineup that has a little bit more depth and is, obviously I'm sure they'll make some other additions, but that starting lineup feels far more legitimate to me as a, play-in or, maybe late or lower in the Western Conference playoffs team as opposed to what they have right now. So Kelly Oubre, maybe an interesting, relatively cheap signing I could see Portland liking regardless, though. I hope he ends up someplace other than Charlotte this offseason. I think he could be a real. I like Kelly Oubre. He's fun, and I think he could be a cool. He's going to be a legitimate contributor wherever he ends up next season. So I think Portland could really benefit from
that. 100% agree there. I'd love to see him end up with Portland there, and with Dame, that could be a cool combo.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that's it's a wrap for this episode. Kind of brings us to a conclusion. We'll be back with you guys soon with some more news, hopefully some more trades to talk about. By the next time
Yep.
we will have spoken, free agency will have started, so we'll have a bit more clarity there, some news updates there, and we'll see what we got jinxed this time. I don't really know. I'm trying to think. Like,
Probably something. A trade.
yeah, maybe one of the trades going wrong. Maybe Kelly Oubre resigns in Charlotte. Maybe Bruce Brown leaves Denver. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see. But
Something weird.
yeah.
It's gonna happen though. Be ready. Come back for it.